Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Property Finance Podcast. And today I'm going to do part 2 of our live deal, which when I did part 1, I promised I would keep everyone up to date and have yet again not kept everyone up to date. However, there are some good reasons because this deal has turned out to be probably one of the biggest learning curves for myself and for the clients involved as well. For obvious reasons, we're going to anonymise as much of this as possible. To say it has been a journey is probably the understatement of the century. So everything that could go wrong has gone wrong. So we're just waiting for some stuff to go right, really. So to kind of catch everyone up, when we spoke on part 1, we were in the process of getting the development finance sorted. We'd bridged the initial purchase of the land. So that had all been done. It had been done on deferred payments. Those deferred payments had been paid off. So the clients had a bridge sat on the land, of which was probably sat at about 50% loan to value. So in terms of ending part 1, it was in a pretty good place. The development finance was just about to get sorted out. Valuation had taken place. QS report had been done. Everything was looking pretty good. Then we come on to part 2. So if we pick up from the valuation and the QS side of things. So in terms of the valuation, touch wood, at the moment, nothing seems to have gone wrong on that side. So the valuation is still coming back spot on around the £850,000 mark, which is what the clients paid for it. So they're pretty happy with the valuation. The GDV valuation also is coming in pretty close to what they expected as well. So from the valuation side of things, touch wood, that seems pretty good at the minute. Then we come on to the QS. And to say that the QS has, and hence why I have to anonymise this, to say the QS has been a nightmare is probably the understatement of the century. However, that being said, the QS has also picked up some pretty major issues. So when the QS was first instructed, they were very unhelpful, is probably the best way of describing it. They didn't want to speak to the clients. They only wanted to speak to the client's architect. Fine, okay, not a problem. Speak to the client's architect. The client's architect was in-house. They'll speak to you. They'll deal with any of the queries you've got because the clients are sat in the other room. There's that communication that they can have between them. However, what transpired was that the QS was dealing with the architect, believing that the architect was not necessarily in-house. So was making comments about the clients which weren't particularly helpful. And likewise, the architect was making comments back again, which weren't particularly helpful. So it got to a point where the QS and the architect were dealing with one another and kind of came to a point where actually they'd both confused one another. So there was unhelpfulness on both sides. What then transpired was the QS, as they always do, began to raise questions about the planning permission, began to raise questions about the pre-commencements, and began to ask for, basically it asked for the approval that the pre-commencements had been discharged, or the ones that should have been discharged pre-commencement. So the architect was adamant that these had been done and had come back numerous times to say, yet they've been done, yet they've been done, yet they've been done. Myself and the client had no reason to disbelieve that and had no reason to worry. It was an architect that was employed to deal with the pre-commencements. So from that side of things, we carried on with the development finance, believing that everything was in place. You're probably getting to the point now where you can guess what happened next. After a lot of toing and froing, the lender then started to raise concerns about the pre-commencements. And I get on very well with the development finance lender, get on very well with the MD there. And we had a very frank conversation where he raised his concerns again about the fact that they had asked about the pre-commencements again and again and again, and that the answers coming back were always, yes, they've been done, yes, they've been done, yes, they've been done. The QS and the lender then raised these concerns for the umpteenth time, and finally, it then transpired that actually the architect had not dealt with these pre-commencements. And it turns out that half of what he should have done hadn't been done. Obviously, this caused a massive problem because the clients, believing that they had everything, as they would do, and the valuer in the QS also up until this point had believed they had everything that they needed to, and solicitors believed they had everything they needed to, had taken the word of said architect and had commenced on site. They had gotten to probably first floor joists at this point, so had spent probably the best part of £250,000 of their own cash and had utilised merchant funding lines. So had run up bills of 100 grand with one merchant supplier, for example. Obviously, at the point where it came out that the pre-commencements hadn't been done, this has caused a massive problem because the clients now have had to stop building on site. They've had to get rid of everyone who was on site, all of the subcontractors. They've had to get rid of all of them. They've all had to be taken off site because obviously without pre-commencements, they can't start the works or shouldn't have started the works. The architect obviously hadn't done his job, so has been politely moved on, and another architect has now come in. This again has caused another cost, another delay, because the clients have now had to bring in another architect to now deal with what should have been dealt with nearly 6 months ago. The other problem that is now looming pretty quickly at the point of recording this is the bridging loan expires in probably 4 weeks' time. Check the date. Yeah, in 4 weeks' time. So in 4 weeks' time, that bridging loan comes to an end. It is bridging on land with planning. So as far as other lenders are concerned, it's not going to be the easiest to refinance onto another bridge. That being said, some of the works have started already, albeit without pre-commencements. So there is an increase in value, potentially, should those pre-commencements come off. And there's no reason why they shouldn't either. Pre-commencements aren't onerous, but they have to be done, obviously, before commencement. In terms of next steps then, so we have the development finance lined up. We're still with the same lender, still with the same QS, still with the same valuer. Obviously, there's been a lot of back and forth again with the QS, and a lot of those bridges have been rebuilt now. So where I mentioned obviously at the start that the QS was being difficult, actually, he was just doing his job, and actually identified a pretty significant hole within this deal in terms of what hadn't been completed. So actually, from the client's perspective, they owe that QS a great deal of gratitude for identifying that and for potentially helping to move on an architect who maybe wasn't the best fit for these guys moving forward. So development lenders all lined up. In terms of the bridging loan that is coming to an end fairly rapidly, we have secured a 6-month extension. So that's there ready to go as of speaking right now. However, there is a cost associated to that. Now, the cost is about £20,000 in terms of extension fees, interest that needs to be paid, etc. That £20,000 is going to be difficult to find because they are £250,000 in the hole on that site already. They can't liquidate that £250,000. There's no way of accessing that £250,000 because it's on a site where pre-commencements haven't been discharged. It's on a site where there's just nothing that you could do to release that money. So we're at a point now where, having done a bit of refinancing of some of the client's other assets, a bit of money's been paid off that bridging loan, hence the extension's now available. We're now in a position where these pre-commencements have got to be done as quickly as possible. And that kind of brings part two to a close, I guess, to a degree, because at the moment there isn't really much else to say because everything that could have gone wrong has gone wrong. It's now leading up to part three, where I hope I can sit here and say the development finance has drawn down, the guys have drawn down £250,000 day one as well, because the QS has gone out, looked at the works that have been done, and has said, "Yep, great, here's £250,000 to cover the works that you've already done," and basically to get them back to square one to then allow them to commence the development properly. That's what I'm hoping I can say at the start of part three. In terms of lessons learnt, I think here in part two, there are some pretty crucial ones because these guys are experienced developers. And I know there are going to be people watching this who think, well, how could you miss that? How could you not have known that the pre-commencements weren't discharged? And I think this is the first lesson to kind of discuss in this is that all too often people put their trust in professionals, whether it be a broker, solicitor, architect, a contractor, whatever, project manager, QS. They put their trust in that professional that they are going to deliver what they've said they're going to deliver within the time they've said they're going to deliver it within, and to the standard that they expect as well. The first lesson is not everyone is going to do that. You may have the world's best architect, but on your particular deal, they might just miss something, or they may have a genuine human error. It's going to happen at some point. There's going to be a moment where a professional lets you down. You need to have a contingency in mind to cover that. So you need to be asking leading questions to your broker, to your architect, to your QS, to everyone. Have these pre-commencements been discharged? And you need to understand what you're asking for as well, because as I said on this deal, everyone asked the architect again and again and again, have you discharged the pre-commencements? And the answer always coming back was, yes, of course I have. He hadn't. So there needs to be that check to say, right, if you have done what you've said you're doing, show me the evidence. Show me something where I can take this and move forward with it, rather than just taking someone at their word. So I think, although it may seem counterproductive to have an architect and then almost do the architect's job for them, I think you have to have a degree of holding someone accountable and asking for the evidence of that as well. So that's kind of the first lesson that I would sort of talk about in this part 2. The second one is make sure you have a good broker who understands the financials of a deal, because I'm going to blow my own trumpet here to a degree. I have managed those financials throughout the entire life cycle of this deal. I'm aware of where every penny is, what every plot of land is worth, what the bridging loan is, how much the bridging loan is going to be at the point of redemption, how much the bridging loan is going to cost moving forward. I've been able to look and do a full financial appraisal of this full situation. So when it comes to realizing the architect hasn't done what he said he was going to do, I know the full financial implication of that. I know how much that architect has cost these clients in pounds and pence. I know the exact figure. Because I know that exact figure, I've had a plan B in mind throughout the entire thing. So we approached the bridging lender for an extension before we needed to, because we had an inclination that there was going to be an issue, that there was going to be a need for extension. So that's been taking place from as early as possible. The development finance lender has been kept up to date the whole way through, because we had kind of this inclination again that something wasn't going to quite go right. So we've been able to keep them updated, keep all of the information flowing to them, keep sending them photos of what's going on site, X, Y, Z. So they've been kept up to date as well. And it's all because, as a broker, we want to stay as involved in the deal as possible. There are far too many brokers out there who will take the deal, go and look for the finance, and then just leave you to it. Right, here you go. Here's the offer of finance. Come back to us when you're ready. I'm not going to get involved in anything else. That can't take place when you're dealing with development finance. It has to be, right, here's the offer, here's the finance. We're now going to hold your hand throughout the entire process. Without a shadow of a doubt, we are going to be here from step one all the way through to the very end until the point of drawdown. Because if you don't have that hand holding, there are things like this that can trip you up. And obviously a development finance lender can get spooked very, very easily. And they could have turned around at any point and said, well, actually, we're really worried about this. This has freaked us out a bit. We don't understand why the clients didn't understand this. We don't understand why the architect has done that. We don't understand why it's got to this point. And as a broker, you sit there and you go, well, actually, here's some reasoning behind it. Here's what's happened. Here's how it's all working. And being able to pick up that contact directly with the bridging lender as well to say, look, we're going to deal with this. We're going to deal with the extension. Don't worry about the clients for now. Come to us, talk to us. We'll deal with everything that we can from our side. And we'll get it to a point where you agree an extension. Then we'll talk to the clients. Then we'll have that conversation with them, put the offer in front of them, get them to understand it, and then come back to you and agree it all. And I think it's really important to have that hand-holding exercise throughout everything so that you as the client feel safe, that you're in a good pair of hands, that if anything goes wrong, someone can then obviously step in and make sure that you see it all the way through to drawdown. So for a part 2, it's a bit disappointing, to say the least, in terms of where we got to. But I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned from this process. And I think given that our audience is predominantly new developers, and there are some of you that watch that are experienced, but I think predominantly our audience is sort of first-time developers and first-time investors. It gives you a bit of insight that even when you get to the point of being experienced, you're still going to make mistakes. You're still going to have people within your professional team making mistakes. And I think it's all about prepping yourself as early as possible to make sure that you're covered, to make sure that you understand where things can go wrong, where the pitfalls are, where the hurdles are, and the best way to approach them when they come. So for a part 2, like I said, a bit disappointing, But I really hope that when we do part 3 in maybe a month, 2 months' time, that we'll be able to give some really positive news and hopefully actually be able to talk through this deal in its entirety. Because, like I said, it's been a hell of a journey. And I think this one especially was probably one of the best ones we ever could have chosen for a live deal. So, yeah, fingers crossed for part 3. But thank you very much for listening. Catch you on the next one.